Hey everybody, and welcome back to Cityscape Brewing. I'm Dennis Fields. Today we're thinking fall. We're thinking fall beers, and today we're going to be brewing up an Oktoberfest, a Märzen style beer that is perfect for that September, October as the seasons are transitioning and you're starting to get into those more seasonal beers. And so you're going to see those start to be released in September-ish or so from the commercial breweries. It's nearing the end of August, so I'm going to get going on mine. This is a traditional lager. We're going to be using dark Munich malt, Vienna, and Pilsner for that. And then we're also going to be using an Omega Oktoberfest yeast that's specific to that strain. This is a lager, so we're going to be fermenting that cold, and we'll get to that part when we get there. But first, let's mill those grains up. Also, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Helps the channel out a lot. Cheers. Next, we're going to get our water, and it says for our strike water, we're going to need about 4 gallons, and we're going to heat that up to about 163 degrees. We're shooting for a mash temperature of 152, which would bring a good balance to this beer, both malty and hop flavor. So we're going to go collect that and get that water heated up, and then we're going to get our water addition set for our strike water and our sparge water. All right, our strike water is up to right temperature at about 162, 163 degrees. We're gonna go ahead and mash in. We already put our water additions in just before we shut off the heat source. So those are all in, including a Camden tablet when we first started. I use calcium chloride and gypsum. All right, we're mashing in. We're trying to hit 152 mash temperature. Make sure there's no dough balls, and then we'll give it a mash rest for 60 minutes. Check the temperature quick here. Again, shooting for about 152. We're at 152.4, spot on. Get the lid on here and we'll give it a 60-minute mash rest. All right, while our mash is doing its thing there for 60 minutes, we're gonna go ahead and get our sparge water ready to go. That is going to be 4.5 gallons. We're going to heat that up to about 175 degrees, and then we're going to let that sit off to the side while we do our Whirlfloc process after our mash is done. All right, guys, our mash is done. We're going to go ahead and start our Whirlfloc process. We're going to be using my new recirculation tool that I made. If you haven't watched that video, go check it out. This really helps this batch sparge process. So as I fill up my regular pitcher here, and before I slowly drain it in, I throw this thing on top, and then I can just pour it in here and let this slowly trickle out while I'm filling up more. Helps that recirculation go a little quicker. All right, we're gonna start by opening this valve a little slowly. Get the wort to start trickling out real slow. Get that grain bed set. So again, that's just kind of leaking that thing slowly over the grain bed again. And I'm able to fill up another pitcher as it's going. So this really helps with the recirculation process. And then when we get to the point where it's coming out pretty clear, after 4 or 5 of these things, I'm gonna throw it right in my kettle. And that's it. We're just gonna let this kind of finish do its job. I've already got it going in the kettle, recirculating back in here. We're gonna let let it get its first runnings here, and then we're gonna put our batch sparge water in there, give it a good stir around, and we're gonna let that sit for 10 minutes. We're gonna do the same process again, and then we're gonna get up to our full boil volume, which I believe is right around 6.5 gallons or 6.7 gallons. Once we get to that point, we're gonna start our boil process. All right, we have our full boil volume at about 6.7 gallons. I'm gonna give it one good stir up here, just to get a hydrometer reading. I'm gonna take a little thing for a refractometer here, just a little bit is all we need for that. Let that cool down, and we're gonna get this thing started to a boil. All right, as we are getting close to boil here, I've added my hop spider. We're only gonna do an ounce of hops as the boil gets started, but I'm gonna add some Firm Cap S, which is gonna help prevent any boil overs, both when it starts and when we add hops. So we're gonna go ahead and get that mixed in real quick. All right, we are getting up to a solid boil now. So I'm gonna go ahead, give this a good stir around, make sure doesn't boil over. Gonna turn that heat source down just a little bit. Let that get all out of its system for a second. All right, that looks like it's going pretty good. We're gonna add our 1 ounce of Hallertau Mittelfruh going in now. All right, there's about 15 minutes left in the boil, so we're gonna go ahead and add our Whirlfloc Tablet. And at the end of the boil, we are going to cool her down and then get it in our fermentation chamber to get it down to pitching temps, which for this lager will be in the low 50s. All right, our batch is done. The boil is done. We're gonna go ahead and turn this off and start our cool down process in our wort chiller. All right, so we got this thing most of the way cooled down, about 80 degrees or so. I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing started. It is gonna have to cool down quite a bit more in my fermentation chamber because it is a lager, and we're gonna be fermenting this at 52 degrees. The yeast we are using is Omega Oktoberfest. I think it's the 107, I think is the number. And the optimum range for fermentation for that is 48 to 54 or 58 degrees. So we're gonna shoot kind of midpoint of that, about 52. That's kind of 6 points either way of that optimum range. So we're gonna shoot for that 50, 52, 54-ish range. And then I don't really want to go much lower than that because then it takes a long time to ferment. I did not make a starter for this one because the Omega yeast says you would not need to unless it is either over 4 months old or you have a batch over 1070. So since this one is much lower than that, I'm expecting original gravity to be somewhere around, I think 1050. I'd have to look at my sheet again, but because of that, I'm not pitching a yeast starter in this one. We're gonna try this out. This is the first time I'm actually using this yeast, so kind of excited about it. I've used other Oktoberfest yeasts, and I always like to switch something up every time I do a different batch. So hopefully this will be good. I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing transferred all the way. We're gonna throw this in the fermentation chamber and let it cool all the way down, and then we'll pitch our yeast here shortly. Before I put the lid on here real quick, I am going to get another sample for my refractometer reading. All right, so here we are. We're ready to pitch our yeast. It has cooled down a lot since we got started. It's now in the mid 60s, which is okay to pitch a little bit early, get these yeast cells kind of going around. And then by the time it actually gets to where it's starting to ferment, it will be in the mid 50s, low 50s, where we are wanting to have our fermentation anyway. So I'm shaking this up real good. Again, Omega yeast that we're using, the Oktoberfest here. Go ahead and shake that up. And we're gonna go ahead and pitch that right in. We have our cap and harness that we'll put over there. All right, guys, that's gonna wrap up the Oktoberfest brew day, but we still have a lot of work to do when we're lagering this beer. So we pitched our yeast, and that thing is going to sit there and ferment at about 52 degrees. And once that finishes up, which should be about a week or week and a half, so it does ferment a little bit slower in the colder temperatures, but you should still have a regular, vigorous fermentation period during that time. As it gets done and gets close to the end of your fermentation process, you want to ramp up the temperature a little bit to give it a real good diacetyl rest. That's gonna rid the beer of any diacetyl, that gives it that butterscotch flavor. So it's really important to raise the temperatures up. I generally like to hit 65 to 67 degrees for the last couple of days of fermentation, or at least last 24 hours or so of fermentation. It really helps eat up all those extra diacetyl, and the yeast will help clean up all those off flavors. And so go ahead and make sure that you do that at the end of your fermentation period. I then am going to transfer to a secondary for a week, where I still keep it at about that fermentation temperatures in the low 50s, maybe even the high 40s for that period. And then I'm gonna go ahead and transfer it to a keg where I'm gonna lager near serving temperatures. And so at that point, I'm just gonna put it in a keg, I'm gonna put it in my kegerator, and I'm gonna forget it. Now you can put it on gas at that point too. So you can put it on CO2, and you can let it go for a long period of time. And at this point, it's really up to you how long you want to let it lager. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever ends up floating your boat. Now, I generally will kind of test it and try that beer after about 2 weeks of lagering, but I won't start really getting into it, drinking it, until at least 3 to 4 weeks of lagering in there. So you want to give it that time to clean up any off flavors, let all those particles settle down and really clear up, and then you're gonna have a real nice finished beer at the end. So when this gets done, I'll do another follow-up video of that Oktoberfest where we're gonna go through the tasting and see how it turned out. But if you have any questions, don't forget to leave them in the comment section below. Please hit that like and subscribe button. And as always, cheers and happy brewing.